ever liked in my whole life. I'm not going to forget about him because of some apparent inconsistencies.
I've had a crush on Farina with some ups and downs for over 2 years.
Farina had an incredible number of boyfriends, at least 20.
Rick Fonseca and Serena Slocum still together. Well, one thing's for certain. She's lost her virginity by now.
How can you say that?
You're right. Maybe she wasn't a virgin.
Is it true you're a baron?
As a matter of fact, it is. I don't take that sort of thing seriously, though.
Rick Fonseca is tall, rich, good-looking, stupid, dishonest, conceited. In short, highly attractive to women.
I don't see how that can be bad.
I shouldn't have to go into all the sordid details.
Well, could you go into a few sort of details?
They're doomed.
What are you talking about?
Downward social mobility?
They're bourgeois.
Shut. Playing strip poker with an exhibitionist somehow takes the challenge away.
And in love.
I mean, for them, men are either dates, potential dates, or date substitutes. Well, I find that dehumanizing.
They're all so very Metropolitan.
I guess you could say it's extremely vulgar. I like it a lot.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having us.
I can't express how happy I am to talk to you because it also gave me another chance to watch the movie for maybe the 10th time this morning. I love this movie so much. It's so funny, it's so charming, and it's just, I don't want to put it in a trivial way, it's just delightful. It's just such a delightful movie to watch. Whit, you know, you weren't necessarily a young filmmaker when you made this film. You weren't in your 20s, you had already had a successful illustration company, correct?
Well, I was in my 30s, and I had a sort of middling successful illustration company.
So how did
These
you come to...
These are the tough questions?
How did you come to filmmaking?
I wanted to be a filmmaker since college, but when I got out of college, there seemed no way into it. And while I was, thinking, writing stuff, trying to plot how to get into film, people like John Sayles, Jim Jarmusch, Spike Lee were making their tiny budget films that reached an audience. And so I just tried to copy them.
Does that era seem like a kind of bygone era where you can make really tiny films and reach a wide audience in the way that they did?
No, I think it's really come back, and it's sort of better technically now than it was then. So now that I think a lot of people are making films at that budget level and getting really good results with the new equipment.
So now it's 25 years later. What was the budget level of Metropolitan?
Well, we started with $50,000 and went through that quickly. And I think the shoot cost about $98,000, and the amount of money we finally had in the film was $210,000.
So all post-production, color, everything, it was about $210,000.
We still had some bills at that, but that's how much money we put in. And then, fortunately, we started selling before we had to pay our lab bill. So we paid our lab bill with the first sale.
Now, I had the Criterion Blu-ray this morning, and I was watching some of the outtakes, and it looks like a pretty scrappy production. What were the two of you thinking when you were taking part in it? You must have known that it was a pretty good script, but did you have any idea that it would live on the way that it would, considering how scrappy you must have felt while shooting it?
Okay.
Both of you?
Again, I mean, it always brings me to the point that this was absolutely every single one of our first film. Every actor, and Whit, and the cinematographer. So it was our first time doing this, so we didn't have anything to compare against, really. For the most part, we were just this really, really cool experience. Like, wow, we get to make our first movie. That was the predominant sentiment, but then I do have certain memories, like of our dolly.
Like what?
Well,
there's a dolly back here.
Right,
that's
it's really nice.
Really beautiful and smooth and doing this wonderful camera movement.
Yeah.
But
People love that dolly.
Our dolly was nothing like that. It was just...
It was basically just like a piece of plywood with some like cartwheels on it and a rope. For real.
How often were you using that dolly? I watched the movie this morning. There wasn't very much. There wasn't that many dolly shots in it.
No, you don't think they're dolly shots, but...
we hid them well.
That when they're walking on the sidewalks of New York, the camera, they are walking and the camera stays in the same place. So it's moving on this little plywood platform.
And we stole a lot of shots. You know, we borrowed the pier and the plaza. And
yeah.
Now, the film takes place in such a particular idea of New York. I'm not sure it necessarily totally existed in the way that you depict it. Are you depicting like a sort of heightened idea of this kind of Upper East Side bourgeois debutante culture?
You could say heightened or lowered. I mean, one of the challenges of the film was we were very low budget, so we couldn't afford to do period. We were shooting the winter of 1988-89, a particularly cold winter. And we wanted to sort of suggest former times, maybe the 60s before Woodstock, maybe another time. And we couldn't really do that. We couldn't put 1960s cars in the streets. So we just focused on having a few things that sort of suggested the past, lost New York. So we had a couple of checker cabs, the boxy checker cabs of the older period that remained constant. And we just tried to avoid things that were too present. So it gave it kind of an aura of the past.
And also title cards like not so long ago,
Yes.
right? So it's like an aura of the past, but then it's not the past. It's sort of existing within its own time space, right?
Timeless.
Exactly, and it is very much a timeless film. Now, for the two of you, when you get this script, it's incredibly funny, and it taps into very human parts of how we live. Even though it's the bourgeoisie, there's jealousy, there's love, there's classism, but it's all hilariously verbose at times. What did you think when you got this dialogue? Was it daunting?
It wasn't daunting. No, it was. Although it was about a group of people that certainly I was not familiar with at the time, and I had to do a bit of research, but it struck me as being highly intelligent and funny, and although it was about a group of people that most of us don't experience, like you said, the experiences that they were going through, it's very human and transcends the sort of environment of, the 1%. It's issues that we all deal with as transitioning from childhood to adulthood. So, and I think that's part of the appeal that it has and why it's lasted so long.
What was your research? Was it listening to Dylan?
What's that?
Your research for that milieu was listening to Dylan talk?
Yes.
Stop.
Because we had two girls from the Manhattan crowd.
Yeah, okay, fine.
Yes.
Dylan somewhat, although she's the downtown club girl person
Right, but
version.
Yeah.
And then Isabel Gillies. And so everyone else, I think, was sort of studying them a little bit. Well, how would you say this?
We were studying their mannerisms and way of talking. She didn't know she was a walking
Whit didn't have to direct, right? You all just, my character wasn't particularly verbose, but you all just had to watch me, right? Kidding.
That's what we did.
One question for the audience. Have you all been well paid for this? Have you all been?
They've all seen and loved the film, Whit.
Oh, yes? Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Do you?
Really?
When you're...
It's opening on August 7th at Lincoln Center.
Anybody going to come? Yeah.
There you go. If you have not seen this film and you're sitting in this audience or you're watching at home and you're in New York, you should go see it. It's a wonderful, wonderful film. And also, as you said, it is a time capsule, not just of this sort of fake time period that you kind of create, but a time period of New York City independent film and independent film
exactly.
in the country, right?
It's a low-budget 80s film, which I think it's interesting that now there are a lot of films working the same way. The whole sort of mumblecore movement I feel really close to. I think they're trying to do the same thing now that we were doing in the 80s.
Do you think so, though? Your films always seem so much more tightly written and focused on, like, you had a really good sense of not just your character's dialogue, but comedy and punchlines and how to tell the story of a scene, more so than sort of experimenting with the emotions throughout a film and people just kind of talking about it.
I haven't really seen any mumblecore films, but I just thought it sounded good to say that. Sort of likable.
You just want some kind of allegiance
I
somewhere
want to be
with someone.
positive.
The term is daunting.
So, when you make this film and it comes out, did you feel like you had a possible success on your hands? Did you guys
I was convinced it was going to be huge. I thought it was going to be like Gone with the Wind. I thought it would be like 20 million, 30 million. And one of the funniest meetings I had was with a Hollywood mogul named Ray Stark. And I got in to see him, and he couldn't get over the fact that he said that people considered a film that grossed $3 million was considered a success. He just kept going, I can't see how that's a success, $3 million. Wow.
And were you like, but it was only 200?
I agreed with him. I said, yeah, we should have done much more.
But it was a huge success considering the amount it cost to make, right?
Absolutely. It
was great. It was wonderful. It was a very thing. But I think a filmmaker, when you get high in your film, you think it's going to do even more. Why not? Why not?
Now this is a New York success movie as well. Do you guys you lived in New York after it came out? Were you recognized a lot more? Were people sort of aware of you because they were seeing the movie?
Yeah, I was recognized, which is a strange experience. I've been walking around Manhattan for most of my life, and so it was odd to all of a sudden be recognized on the street, and I would get very self-conscious.
Were you really working at Macy's?
I was working at Macy's, so that was another thing.
And it's like
strange.
It's like one of those kinds of movies, sort of like Kids almost, where I think people, because maybe they're from New York and they're in this movie that's kind of about New York, people assume that you have to be like your character.
Exactly.
That this is kind of about you, right?
That's the experience that I have had for the past 25 years, and so there's not these sort of like legion. It's not the number. It's not the quantity as much as the quality. And I run across people and have run across people for years and years and years who only identify me as Sally Fowler.
Do they say you're part of that Sally Fowler crowd?
No, it's more like, oh my God, Sally Fowler. It's a bit more like that.
Is that flattering?
Of course. Are you kidding? This whole thing is just unbelievable. It's super fun.
The film, though, it really, you said a Manhattan film. It really is true, because once I examined where the box office came from, and I think it was $3 million gross, and I think 1/3 of that, $1 million, came out of Manhattan, the play dates in Manhattan, because it kept playing here. I think it was 7 months, and so maybe people from out of town were seeing it. They're passing through town. They'd catch it when it was here and still playing. And this re-release now that we are going to start in Manhattan and then go to Washington and Los Angeles the next week on August 14th. And then they already have dates for Chicago and other towns. So we hope to sort of expand a little bit.
How did this re-release come about?
We were at a reception for a film festival, the Telluride Film Festival. We ran into the people from Rialto Pictures there. We just heard that Vanity Fair was going to do a reunion photo shoot with the cast, which has just hit the newsstands today in the September issue with Taylor Swift?
Taylor Swift's on the cover, right? So
on the cover. And so we told the Rialto people that it's 25th anniversary and Vanity Fair is covering it, and they're really interested, and so
immediately said at the event, wow,
amazing,
we would love to re-release. So.
Does that just blow you away that this film that you made for $220,000, really like $60,000, $70,000 when you were on set, that 25 years later you're doing a Vanity Fair reunion
Unbelievable. Awesome, amazing, pinch me, Twilight Zone, awesome.
I don't think it's ever happened before where a film like Metropolitan has been recognized 25 years later and will be in Vanity Fair magazine. I don't think it's ever happened before with any other independent film.
They brought Diamonds by Guard. For real.
And it's one of those films that...
every year there's a whole new group of films that have a 25th anniversary. We should acknowledge that.
Really? It happens to other people?
Every year there's a new group of 25th anniversary
Wait.
films.
The actual entire
Like
Vanity
this?
Fair magazine is just happy 25 to all these different movies.
No, the Vanity Fair is different, but the 25th anniversary happens to a lot of films.
Okay, no, I'm going to tell this story because it was the first time Whit put me in touch with Vanity Fair, and I was on the phone with Mark Rozo, one of the deputy editors over there, really, really great guy. First time I spoke with him, and he said to me at one point, he's like, off the record, do you guys all, get along, or what's it like? And like, oh yeah, of course, we have nothing but warm feelings for each other. He said, yeah, I just did the same thing with The Sound of Music. It was the same. And it took me a minute, and I was like, because I thought he was talking about like another a Broadway version.
The Sound of Music?
He compared, and I was like, oh my God, he just compared us to The Sound of Music. Again.
We had to cut out the musical numbers though in our film.
Well, you still got the cha-cha-cha in there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Where did that come from? Did the cha-cha-cha scene, did that come from your time, the sort of time that you spent hanging out with these sort of debutante parties in the late 60s, right?
Well, I was always confused by the cha-cha. I never knew you should call it the cha-cha or the cha-cha-cha.
I have no idea.
Yeah. And so it just
Blue-collar
seemed like
kid.
a good idea. I mean, the thing is, we're stuck with a film with characters talking in rooms. And what other things can characters do in a room that's interesting to watch and doesn't cost too much and it's not X-rated, which is maybe doing the cha-cha. So we have a cha-cha scene.
And it was absolutely the only thing that we ever rehearsed.
Oh, really?
You actually sent us to a dance school for the day.
Yes.
To learn the cha-cha, and then the cha-cha people showed up on the set. And
Really? Can't believe we
And we
had such
cha-cha'd.
preparation.
You did, I remember that. And of
Dispense
course,
for
I
that.
had to sit that one out. And I
But
wanted
it's
to
an
be
important
present.
scene for you and Tom and
It's true. Looking forlorn.
This film has it gets picked up by different generations as well. It's not just sort of a classic 25 years later for those that were adults when it came out in theaters. I was pretty young when it came out in theaters. I picked it up a few years later when I was like 17 years old, and I loved it. And then when I mentioned to someone that I was interviewing you guys, this is like an associate producer that works in this building that's probably like 22. They're like, I love Whit Stillman. I love Metropolitan. And I was kind of like, this movie does endure. Like, it just keeps getting picked up by different generations, and they understand it. Do you sort of think that has a lot to do with the timelessness that you were going for of the film, that's kind of what helps it endure so long?
Well, I think we've been lucky in the sense that sort of new formats come out and new channels come out. And so there's a period when Sundance Channel would show it a lot. Then Criterion picked it up and put it out, and that got a lot of more attention. But still, to sort of put yourself in your place, I run into old friends from the old days, and they say, Whit House Doubleday. And Doubleday was like my job, years before Metropolitan. And so, yeah, I think it's great that so many people have seen it, but so many people, with an independent film, it's like just nothing like the awareness you're ever going to get with a sort of massively released film. So, there are always things keeping us in our place,
Now, with this film, as timeless as it is, it does feel like it's depicting New York at a certain time, and you feel like a quintessential New Yorker when you guys are from New York as well. Obvious question, how has it changed since you guys shot this film? Does it feel like the same city to you? Does it feel like something completely different? Does it feel livable?
I think it's very different. I think at the time there was such a romance to it. Although New York is still romantic, but for us, I feel being in that little world we had, New York had such a mystique to it, at least from my perspective, and it was very romantic. It was New York at night, and I think New York obviously has changed in the past 25 years, and it's a little harsher. Although I think so. I think
a lot of people say that. Yet, if you equate harshness to violence in the city or something, violence has gone way down. But there is a harsher
there was an
sentiment.
Innocence. I think there was more of an innocence back then, and I think that definitely comes through in the film, and that's part of its charm.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's funny. I experienced the Upper East Side is one of the few places in the city that I don't think has changed vastly. But the rest, it hasn't. But the rest of the city, I mean, it's unrecognizable.
Become more like the Upper East Side.
No, well, and in fact trumped the Upper East Side, right? I mean, Tribeca used to be a ghost town. Ghost town.
But one question for Carolyn. Had you been in Manhattan much before you made the film? You'd already been in Manhattan a lot?
Oh, yeah. I used to come into the city when I was a teenager all the time.
But what neighborhood were you living in when you were going to high school?
Queens.
Which part of it?
Bayside. All right. Queens is in the house. So, yeah.
Because, I mean, yeah, it's sort of quintessential New York film, and some of us had, New York experiences. Other people came from elsewhere. But I think all of us had sort of partial experiences. Like, none of us were, like, all our lives Manhattanites. I mean, I had only come in for that sort of teen period. And that's why I think these people were important for me, because I didn't really know people. And so you go to a party and you meet people who you happen to like that group. And that's really important to you because you don't have the old friends from, when you're in elementary school or high school particularly.
Was it strange for you that I think a lot of times people associated the sort of the backgrounds of these characters with your background as well? A lot of people assumed that you were very similar and lived the same lives as these characters. Was that odd for you?
Well, no. I mean, it was close to the sort of Tom Townsend outsider character, and a lot of the characters in the film have a sort of a seed of some real person doing real things, but then it becomes fiction and different.
So do you guys, I know there's a Vanity Fair piece coming out with 25 years later, but do you guys all keep in touch? Is there warm feelings when you see each other, or does the cast keep in touch at all?
I think we try to, but there have been gaps. I mean, Carolyn was in the last feature I made, Damsels in Distress. I wanted to show her range. And I tried to get her for a homicide episode I was making in '96, and I think the casting director was being pressured by the producer to get a big-name actress for that part, so they told me they couldn't find her, or we can't find her.
You directed a homicide episode?
Yes, I directed one, and they cast Rosanna Arquette instead of Carolyn.
Was that your first foray into directing TV? Was that one of the only times that you've directed sort of?
It's one of the only times. Because I think
you enjoy it?
They didn't like the fact that I wanted to use all the actors from my other films.
You wanted to do an episode of Homicide set in Metropolitan, basically.
Yes, Chris Eigerman.
Yeah, that's a little strange.
Chris Eigerman, also from Metropolitan, was in that episode. It was a fun episode, and Rosanna Arquette, she was Roxanne Arquette. She was really good, but you would have been different version. Different.
Absolutely, I would have preferred it.
We'll reshoot it. We'll reshoot it and have a director's cut.
Make it a feature. Make this Homicide episode a feature-length movie with the cast of Metropolitan. It'll go on the internet. That's it.
Yes.
I think we have some time for questions. Do we have any questions here from the audience?
They didn't pay them that much. Oh, you were paid.
Hey, how's it going? Yes, Bayside in the house. Lived in Bayside, went to Bayside High School. Congratulations on your success.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Question for each of you. What was your favorite scene in Metropolitan to shoot?
There were so many. Let me see. My favorite.
I think it's easy. But you guys go ahead.
Okay.
I
Strip
think
poker.
it's easy.
Stripper. Yeah, that wasn't my favorite. There's a scene where Tom and I are talking about Kate Preston. And we were on the couch and we had the case of the giggles. Could not stop laughing.
Oh, was that the Jane Austen scene as well? The
on the stairs.
Is that on the DVD?
On the DVD, there's the scene where
the
you're
goof reel, yeah.
where you're asking what Jane Austen books have you read,
Yes.
but you just can't get through it.
We had the case of the giggles, and they show things on TV. They'll show outtakes where people are uncontrollably laughing, but film cost money, and you're not supposed to do that. So we got a little reprimand, but that has to be my favorite scene.
When you get a case of the giggles while you're shooting, it's almost impossible to. And even if someone
impossible to
reprimands you, it becomes even more
It's worse.
difficult.
I know.
I'm sorry.
You can't.
Sorry.
We did. We got a little bit of a reprimand, but it was okay.
What was your favorite scene?
Mine?
Yeah.
I think that with the dance scene, of what we had of a dance scene, we couldn't really afford a full thing. So we were down the Surrogates Court building, and we had 3 tables. And it's where they do, in the trailer, they do the conga line. And we could afford 3 bottles of red wine to put on the tables. And mysteriously, the contents of those bottles disappeared while we were shooting. And our free extras, who are sort of friends of friends, decided it'd be better to go out and get a lot of 6-packs. So they were drinking 6-packs. And it was kind of a festive atmosphere for our shoot.
It was super fun.
Is it difficult to direct in a festive atmosphere, though? Or was everyone pretty...
That was good. I mean, it was that was a good shooting day. It was really expensive for us because the only location that cost us money, because it's free. You can use the Surrogates Court building for free, but then you have to pay $500 for security. So it wasn't free.
More questions from the audience right here?
Hey guys, thanks so much for being here today. I want to ask you, Whit, you said that you worked with Caroline on your last film, and you're going to be working with Kate Beckinsale and Chloe Sevigny from Last Days of Disco on your next movie. What's it like to watch actors evolve over a span of decades? And also, do you have any plans to revisit the characters from Metropolitan in that setting today?
I mean, there was a the characters from Metropolitan actually do appear briefly sort of in the background in Last Days of Disco, because one of our premises about sort of that insanely popular nightclub is it brought people from all different groups in. So actually Carolyn and Dylan were both in Last Days of Disco playing their Metropolitan characters. And then Taylor Nichols, Charlie, the doomed bourgeoisie guy from Metropolitan, he was cast in Damsels 2 as the teacher, and I think we lost, we're shooting like 7 o'clock in the morning, and we sort of lost the idea that he was going to do Charlie Black, this character. So he just does a teacher character. But we had sort of at one point the idea, and then I got spaced out and didn't do that.
After Disco, you took a break a fair amount of time before Damsels, right?
Well, the industry took a break on me. I guess they didn't like the homicide episode. I don't know. I had 10 years without making anything. But I was writing, and I didn't realize I was a career disaster. I didn't realize I was in director's jail, as they call it.
So you were in director's. I had always heard that it was that you had decided to take a break. You just couldn't get anything off the ground.
No, the industry was taking the break.
How does that happen? Did you realize that the industry had taken a break on you? Like,
It's
what happened?
It's incredibly deceiving, and I think it's a danger that some of you are probably filmmakers or future filmmakers. It's a danger to really believe that this thing that looks like it's going to happen is really going to happen. And I think I got into the industry kind of more professionally in a more conventional way, and just a lot of stuff that everyone is telling you is going to happen doesn't happen. So it's much better to kind of control some projects yourself on a small scale. You can go ahead and do them. And I got involved in things that are more complicated with the rights to books and different companies involved. And you think they're going to happen. They're doing casting, they're doing locations, but they very often don't happen.
What's the closest you've ever gotten to a film and then it just didn't happen?
Well, I haven't gotten to those incredibly brutal, painful situations where it's really about to happen. But my Jamaican film that I long wanted to make, a film set in Jamaica in the early 60s, we were down there doing casting and looking at locations and staying in Chris Blackwell's hotel, and it seemed serious at the time.
And then it just falls through, and that's years of work that are...
Yeah.
Wow. Any more questions? I drove this down. Sorry, guys.
Thanks again. I love names that work both ways, and you're the first Dylan I've met as a female, so I just wanted to point that out. But my question is for both Carolyn and Dylan. It's a two-part question. I wanted to know, what do you enjoy most about acting, and what obstacles, if any, did you have to overcome in order to pursue your career?
Okay. I would say that there is nothing else in life that makes me feel how acting makes me feel. When I am doing it, I feel connected to myself and other people, and to the material in a way that feels very transcendent. It's very spiritual to me, straight up. And sorry, what was the part two again?
obstacles, if any, did you have to overcome to pursue your career?
The business. It's a tough business, right? It's a super tough. There just aren't enough job positions available for all the people that want to fill them, right? A lot of talented people in the world, and there's not a lot of room for all of us.
And there's sort of a typecasting problem.
That's
maybe.
what I was going to say. Once you're in a film that has some success, people often see you as that character, and it's hard to break free of that mold that they put you in. So that's definitely an obstacle to overcome. And like Dylan said, to me, acting is. I always feel actors are born and not made. So it's something, a part of you, like having brown eyes or brown hair. It's not something you can ever get away from. So, and it's sort of like trying to do something else is like putting on a pair of shoes that don't fit you, or the leather's too stiff, and they never just quite work. So when you get to do acting, which is something that you're meant to do, it's like walking on the shoes that you were meant to walk on. It's almost like, to me, it seems like floating. Yeah. And it's definitely, like you said, a transcendent experience. So.
Thank you for that really good question. And as a director, I think this thing about sort of people born to it, you really do feel that way. You do sometimes encounter people who are really well trained and really smart, and you respect them a lot, but they don't have what Carolyn and Dylan had in our film and still have, which is just, it's just going to be great. You know, they're going to do it, and it's going to be great. And so it's really, the thing about the naturalness, I think, is really true.
Absolutely, I agree wholeheartedly, having watched the film again this morning. Do you feel like you were typecast after the film? Do you feel like people were trying to cast you as Audrey all the time?
Yes.
It's definitely true. I years after, I saw a casting director, and I said, "Why isn't Carolyn doing more things? You know, why don't you bring her in? Why don't you get?" You know, and he said, "Oh, we bring her in a lot." And I said, "For what?" He said, "Oh, for preppy debutante parts." And I said, "Well, that's not actually Carolyn's background. She was acting that. That's her. She could do anything. She could do all kinds of things."
Well, Chris as well. He got kind of typecast as like the sort of fast-talking, motor-mouth smartass, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think...
Very good at it, but...
But I mean, I think that is actually a part that could be parlayed into a career. That is something that you could make the typecasting almost work for you with that. But I don't think the interpretive work that Carolyn was doing, playing Audrey, is very different, works that way. She has to be given the chance to do different things. And I thought it was really interesting that Martin Scorsese cast her in Age of Innocence. And she was great in that, playing an obnoxious elder sister or something like
that. Next question.
Hi, this is a question for Whit. I just wrote my first screenplay, and I have a question for you. What is the best advice you can give to an aspiring screenwriter?
That it's never finished. You never finish your screenplay. And when I hear stories about people who've been trying to get something, you know, done for 10 years, I'm assuming that it's changing during those 10 years, because it has to be changing. And I mean, I just think it's a question of being honest about your work and getting into the right shape and deciding, you know, what's the realism of this script? Is it something I should just make between me and friends for $5,000 or $10,000, or do I really need all the money that the industry really requires generally? And if there's any way of just making it happen, of just doing it, that would be great. Because if you try to have to work through all kinds of other people making decisions, it becomes very hard to have it ever happen.
Are you writing on set while you're directing, if the script is always changing? Because your films feel so particular and so astute to your voice.
Yeah, that's a really good question, because the first 3 films were essentially very, very precise and all that. And then with doing this pilot, The Cosmopolitans, I did a pilot that Amazon Studios backed, and it's actually still available for free.
Should have been picked up.
Well, it's still in process.
Okay.
So the pilot, they've put it back up, so it's kind of hard to find. It's on Amazon.com. It's free. It's only 26 minutes. It's called The Cosmopolitans. That, we had one casting difficulty, plus they wanted to have Chloe Sevigny's part bigger. And I had material from the other half of the episode that I hadn't used, so I actually did write stuff on that, and it really, really worked well. And so the new film, Love and Friendship, with Chloe again and Kate Beckinsale, there was an actor who was incredibly, incredibly funny, and material was occurring. So I was writing, like on weekends and early mornings, new scenes that occurred to us that seemed helpful. And so when it came to set, there'd be some revisions and stuff, taking out dialogue that's too wordy and all that. But during the process of making these two things, The Cosmopolitans and Love and Friendship, there was much more writing going on than in the previous films, and I was really happy that it happened.
Now, was that just sort of part of that project itself? Like that project necessitates you to write like that on the weekends and bring it to set? Or is that you feeling a bit more liberated as a creator, a bit more confident?
A bit both. I mean, I really don't want it to have the plan for the future. I mean, I'd prefer to get everything right and just go with it. But I think that if really good things occur to you and something is really working and you can expand it, and other things aren't so good and you have to kind of trim them.
It's just the filmmaking process,
but I don't
right?
think it should be the plan. I think you're absolutely right.
You have to kind of let everything breathe within that particular part of the process, the writing, the shooting, the editing.
A lot happens in the editing. I mean, very late in the process, things happen. And we had a very funny graphics designer, Teddy Blanks, who had really funny ideas for damsels. So he kept adding little things that Teddy was coming up with.
Absolutely. I think we have time for one more question. Hi.
Hi. When did that light kind of go off that you were talking about, that it's something that you were meant to do and knew that it was putting your shoes in and knowing that it was what you were supposed to do?
You go first.
Okay.
I know mine.
I'll go first. There was never a moment for me. It was just something that I always wanted. I didn't even know it was to be an actor. When I was a kid, I wanted to be inside the TV, living out these scenarios. And I'd go in the corner and then act them out and talk to myself. My mother thought I was a bit goofy, but... So she's like, I wonder how many years of therapy this is going to take care of. And I never even knew it was to be an actor until I got older. And my mom put me into acting school. And it was from there. There was never a moment. It was just something I always sort of knew. So, thanks.
I was always drawn to it as well, I would say. Drawn to it, and even started, I went to a summer camp that had summer stock when I was 12 years old. And, I really, really wanted to do it. And, we're foolish when we're teenagers sometimes. My best girlfriend was on TV. Okay, she was on a show called Kate and Allie. And inside myself, I said, well, I can't do it because she's doing it. And she'll think I'm copying her. But it's really what I really wanted to do. And then, so right out of high school, in any case, Stars Alive, where I said, okay, this is what I'm going to go do. And I went to go looking for a teacher, and it turned out it was my director from my camp, from my summer stock, a guy named Ron Stetson from the Neighborhood Playhouse, who I love. And I got there, and I sat with him, and I went to that class, and the moment I started working with him, I felt magically at home. Yeah.
I guess the last question then, Whit, just take that to you. When did it hit you? When did those shoes come to you that fit to direct?
Well,
so poorly phrased.
We understand.
Shoes that you fit, that you use directing.
Well, just to finish what you guys were saying, I remember two words that a lot of the actors in the film kept saying, which was Meisner Technique. Were you two the Meisner Technique crowd?
Yes.
That seemed to work.
Adler, is it Meisner? Which Adler is method? Meisner is sort of like a referencing your
Sanford
acting. Right?
Meisner, Stella Adler, and Lee Strasberg all pulled from
that's
Konstantin Stanislavski in Russia, and it's all a version of what Stanislavski was doing at the group theater in Russia. To be specific.
Is Meisner? Sorry, I don't want to interrupt, but now I'm just kind of curious. Is Meisner the one where it's kind of method, but it's also like you sort of are referencing acting a little bit while you're performing? I heard
red sweater. Repeat. No, you repeat. Repetition. That's one of the primary exercises in Meisner. Is like, I would say actually, blue shirt, and then you would say
blue shirt.
Blue shirt. Blue shirt. That's that.
Right.
blue shirt.
Blue shirt. Yeah.
But it's
just an
striped.
exercise to get you listening. Okay. So it doesn't matter what you're saying, but just the fact that you
can
have
say green
to
sweater.
listen and watch what the other
if you're wearing a green sweater.
Got it.
So.
Difficult to encapsulate.
A lot of actors out here are like, you idiot.
Do I get my question?
Yeah,
okay.
Go ahead.
So
now you may, Whit.
So I mean, a lot of opportunities come out of failure at something else. So one door doesn't open at all, and so you push what door will open. And so I fell in love with F. Scott Fitzgerald when I was 15. I wanted to, write novels and things like that. And then I thought it was too hard, kind of fiction, like you have to be alone all the time, and it's too bad. So I thought, what can I do that's kind of less hard than writing novels? And I was liking a lot of the comedies. It was the kind of golden age of comedy on TV. When I was in college, I said, this is something, maybe I have the wherewithal to be involved in this world. And then it seemed like it was very hard. How do you enter this profession? We had to have this sort of whole indie movement before I realized how I could possibly get into. And I just wrote this script, to have something to direct. And I didn't think I'd keep on, writing romantic films with people talking too much. But one thing works, and you go back to the well.
Do you go back to the well that you know works, or are you just going back to the well that is your creative well, and that's what kind of comes out at the end of the day?
It's a little both, but I think that, maybe if I'd been younger when I started, and maybe if the right opportunity to come along as directing an objective project with a script in some other area, because I was semi-attached to some projects that didn't go ahead, that the career could have been different. It could have been more like these people who do all kinds of things, but that didn't happen, so I had to do my own stuff.
Absolutely. Thank God you did, guys. Thank you so much for being here. Congratulations on 25 years. I love the film so much. Thank you so much. Guys, thank you so much for watching.
Thank you, guys.